welcome to Business Today India Today Group. I'm Karishma Sudani, and joining me is Jim Andrew, Chief Sustainability Officer, PepsiCo. Jim, thank you very much for joining us on this chat.
A pleasure. Great to be here.
And welcome to Delhi.
Thank you.
Are you liking it here?
I do. I always love coming back to India.
Wonderful. Jim, you are leading sustainability globally at PepsiCo at a very important time, especially at a time where conversations around climate risks or, say, resource constraints are the talk of the town, along with, of course, environmental discussions. And India is an important market for PepsiCo to also look from the sustainability front, and especially a climate volatile market, I'd say. So let me begin by asking you that when we look at PepsiCo from emerging markets like that of India and others, have sustainability been able to deliver measurable business value beyond just environmental impact?
Let me maybe just step back and give a little bit of context about PepsiCo, and then we can dig into those markets. PepsiCo has been working in areas that would be called sustainability for a very long time. But 5 or 6 years ago, we said we really want to put sustainability at the center of our strategy. And I originally started at PepsiCo as the head of corporate strategy. So I was asked then to put those two together because we see sustainability as a way to create growth and value. And so we're a branding company, we brand everything. So we called our program PepsiCo Positive. And it's really about how do we use sustainability, where do we put it, and how do we use it to drive long-term value. And so in any market around the world, including India and the other emerging markets, we're really looking at what are the things that we need to do to reduce our environmental footprint, to be a good citizen in the communities we're in, to be able to create shared value for our partners and stakeholders, to be able to do that, to be able to create sustainable growth in a long-term way, while at the same time delivering business results in the short term. And so it's that set of trade-offs that we're always working towards, but to drive sustainability forward across our entire enterprise and all the countries in the world.
Right. You did talk about PepsiCo Positive. Tell me, how has the feedback been like? You say 5 years so far, but a long way to go.
Yeah, it's a never-ending journey, and it always will be. But for us, it's really helped galvanize the organization. So internally, our associates are very proud of it, and we work very hard across all countries, all topics, to be able to make progress on the things that are important, and we can go into detail on that if that's something you want to cover. But it's also something externally, because we're big believers in we need to be good partners. We need to collaborate. No company can go on this journey by themselves. I always say sustainability is a team sport, and we need partners and collaborators. And to do that, we need to be trusted. And a big part of trust, I always say transparency plus accountability is what builds trust. And so we are very clear about what's important to us, about the goals that we have, about how we're doing, about the challenges we're facing, and about what we need from partners. And so it's really been very well received because we've been able to create that clarity, that transparency. And also, importantly, we link it to our business. So it's not CSR. It's not something that we do. We have parts of our organization that do that. But this is really integrated into our business and how we run the company, into the DNA, into decision making, into remuneration, into all the things that make a company and help drive us forward and to grow and be a good partner in the communities we're in.
Great. You did mention a part where you said marketing is at the helm of discussions, of course, for a company like PepsiCo. Was there a challenge to kind of keep a balance between conveying the message via sustainability while also retaining the identity of the brand?
PepsiCo as a brand is something we actually just relaunched our PepsiCo brand late last year. PepsiCo as a brand is not all that well known. Consumers know and love us through our product brands. So here in India, Pepsi and Keurig and Lay's, right? I mean, these are brands that people have grown up with. PepsiCo is a brand some people know and some people don't. What we've tried to do is to say all those brands that you know and love are actually part of a larger company that really cares about the role that we play in society, the role that we play for the communities, for the people we interact with. People don't know this, but PepsiCo is at its heart a huge agricultural organization. We source 50 major crops from 60 major countries. In India alone, we work with 27,000 farmers across 14 states. So, these things are important that we do to be able to have a healthy business, a resilient supply chain, but be able to, again, bring those brands that consumers love and make sure that we still have crops that allow us to create those products.
Very well said, Jim. And since we're getting deeper into understanding India, and you did mention of some important data about your presence, climate volatility is is a risk that India is facing actually across the globe. We're not just talking about India as one emerging market, but across the globe it's spread. Tell me, did PepsiCo have to revisit its, say, agri-supply chains or strategies that were already existing with farmers at the fundamental base level in order to adapt?
What we've done is, PepsiCo has always been a very local for local company.
Local for local.
Local for local. Because in terms of sourcing, we source potatoes around the world. And so we work with farmers, here in India, but in other countries. So in here, the Lay's and Uncle Chips are 100% locally grown Indian potatoes. Right? And so we've always been deep into the communities and the countries where we are because we have those sourcing relationships. And many of those relationships, I was out on a farm earlier this week outside of Ahmedabad, and I met with 10 or 15 farmers, and and one of the farmers brought his father, so the first generation, and also his children. The third generation, and so it was a really special moment for me to be able to be talking to the patriarch who had been farming for, I think he said 50 or 60 years, the father, the current mate who'd been working with PepsiCo for 15 or 20 years, and the next generation who will be working with PepsiCo and taking over. And so it was really a special moment, but that's not uncommon. We have lots of farmers that we work with who have been growing for Lay's and other brands for multi-generations. And so that's really important, but we need them to be resilient. We need them to be able to deal with the shocks. And as you said, this is happening more and more wherever you are. Hotter places are getting hotter, drier places are getting drier, places that are wet are getting wetter. And so how do we work with the farmers and the other people in the supply chain to be resilient? But because we've always been pretty local in what we do, and especially on our foods business, that's something where we just are getting deeper and deeper. So we haven't had to change, we've had to just continue to get deeper and make sure we need to keep farmers farming, and we need farmers to be successful to be able to. It's good for the communities, good for the country, it's good for our business.
Great. Let me also address a very important element to this conversation, which is to do with sustainable packaging. What strategies do PepsiCo utilize when it comes to sustainable packaging in India? And it's a follow-up question, but do you see a resource constraint a problem there?
Let me take the first piece, and then so packaging is a very important part of any food company. If we take the food business, right, it delivers the product safely. It makes sure that it's of high quality. It makes sure that it stays fresh. It makes sure when you open that bag or open that canister that it's what you expect. So, and it protects it. So packaging is very important. What we try to do is to make sure that packaging, a couple of things. One, we're always looking at how do we reduce the amount of packaging, right? Because so we have a number of initiatives on an ongoing basis to reduce the packaging, whether it's make the bag an optimized size, or to make the thickness of the film the appropriate thickness. And there's a lot of R&D and technology that goes into that. Another piece is to make sure that that packaging can be recycled. So that's, again, making sure that in our foods business here for Lay's, we're moving to polyolefin-based packaging that will be recycle ready. And it's really designed based on circularity principles. And then working with the entire ecosystem to make sure that packaging that can be recycled actually gets collected and then is actually recycled in practice. And that's not something that any one company can do. That requires an entire ecosystem. And so we work with a large number of organizations here in India. Tetra Pak is a partner on responsible sourcing initiative. We're working with the India Plastics Pact to be able to, again, how do we create the enabling policy conditions, infrastructure, and principles to make sure that in a very large, geographically diverse market with a large informal sector, that the rights and the respect for the informal sector happens, that the packaging gets collected, it gets segregated, gets sorted, and ultimately then that there's policy that allows it to go back into food grade packaging. And so all those things have to happen. We saw a great example in our beverage business where Pepsi Black in 2023, with our bottling partner here, Varun Beverages, VBL, brought out the first 100% recycled PET bottle of any carbonated soft drink in India. And we were ready to do that with Varun, but what we needed was the enabling policy to actually allow that to happen. So all these things have to happen as an ecosystem to be able to do that. And we work to help lead those changes to make sure that these things can actually happen, in addition to what we can largely, control in our own world.
Yeah, and while this is a longer process, I'm not getting into specific data, Jim, but I'd love to know for our viewers that to what extent are PepsiCo's products sustainability packaged in India, and also if you could give an insight into globally, how does it work with PepsiCo?
Yeah, so globally, 93% of our packages are what we call are able to be recycled.
Oh, wonderful.
So 93% by weight of our packaging material can be recycled. It fits into the recycling schemes in various countries, all of which have slightly different laws and specifications and regulations, as you know, yes. And in India, we don't break out the specific numbers, but again, PET is something that we are very active in, and you know that market well. And then, as I said, in our packaging, we're moving towards polyolefin-based packaging, which we know can be recycled. We're also 100% compliant already with the EPR mandates and regulations. So it's something that's very important to us, and we're continuing to move aggressively to be able to do that.
Are we at least at the half of 93%?
We don't break out the numbers.
Okay, but I'm sure you do have a plan that you do come to a point where the Indian market is also well adapted to the sustainable.
Correct. We look at all markets and we move as quickly as the ecosystem allows us to do so in a pragmatic way. Yes, that's.
Okay, great. There is also growing scrutiny against greenwashing, and I would like to understand your insights from PepsiCo's point of view.
Greenwashing is something that we take very, very seriously because, again, go back to one of the comments I made earlier. Ultimately, it's about trust, right? What I want to be as PepsiCo is I want to be the preferred partner to anybody, to a local municipality, to a state or federal government, to an NGO, or to another company. I want to be the preferred partner. To do that, I have to be trusted, right? I have to do what I say, and I have to speak clearly about my priorities and the challenges. And so we've always said, how do you do that? You use data, you share data wherever possible. You are aligned with globally recognized standards, so SBTI, flag reporting, all the acronyms that you know so well. We do all of our reporting based on those. We win awards for our reporting every year. And so these are things that, because if we're transparent and we hold ourselves accountable and we publish every year our progress against a very clearly defined set of goals that are consistent. When we make a change, and we have, last year we made some changes, we accelerated some goals, we held many goals the same, and a couple we said systemic changes are not, honestly not going as fast as we had hoped around the world, but we're very transparent and we're very clear because ultimately we build trust, and that's what's important. So from a greenwashing standpoint, what we're really trying to do is to obviously avoid that completely and let people know where we stand, what we need, and what we believe in, and how we're doing.
Okay. Jim, let me come back to the farmers conversation, and you and me both know that agri is this country, is the crux of this country's economy. And you did talk about and shared an interesting story of your on-ground visit to one of the farming lands near Ahmedabad. Now, at PepsiCo, regenerative agriculture is also something that is significantly taken up. Now, if I particularly and specifically talk about farming in India and regen agri with farmers in India, is there an on-ground challenge that you think is still being tackled with on this perspective? Because while technology is helping, while sustainability is helping, sometimes it's also to do with the convincing, the behavioral aspect.
There's an on-ground challenge every country in the world. And I think that's maybe the nature of farmers. You know, farmers are business people, whether they're very large or a woman in her backyard trying to grow a few potatoes to be able to help put her children into school, which are many of the farmers that we work with, especially in the West, especially over in West Bengal, excuse me. And so there's always a challenge because they're business people. They get one, maybe 2 times a year to get it right. And if a harvest fails or they try something new and it doesn't work, that's their livelihood. So farmers are very much, show me. Don't tell me, show me. And so we've found that there's really 3 things that are really important as we help farmers and work with farmers to adopt regenerative practices. And globally, we've brought regenerative practices with a lot of partners to about 3.5 million acres in 2024. We're going to report our 2025 numbers soon, and those are higher than that. And we're continuing. That's, as you say, it's something that's very important to us. But the 3 things that are important are, 1, financial help. Yeah. So if you're going to make a change, and it costs money, maybe it's for different, new seeds or a different piece of small equipment, whatever the case may be. How do we help them financially? How do we help them technically? What specifically do I do? If I'm talking about applying fertilizer differently, okay, on my piece of ground, on my farm, what do I do specifically? And so you need to provide them that technical advice. And then the part you're talking about, those help convince. It's also the social element, where we have a number of demo farms around the world where we bring farmers in to show what other farmers are doing. This works here, and I can talk to somebody, you can talk to somebody, but when a farmer talks to another farmer, it's a whole different level of conversation. And so that's very much what we use. We also work with really hyper-local organizations that know those farmers, that maybe their fathers went to school together, whatever the case may be, or they've both been farmers and their fathers were farmers, right? So because they're trusted. Right? And again, so much of it comes back to trust. But it really takes all 3 of those elements, the financial, the technical, and the social, to do that convincing, to be able to get real change. I mean, we're ultimately about real change on the ground. And so that's what we care about, is results. And so how do you do that? We've developed this approach, and it works very well if we get the right partners.
Great. And since you're talking about partners, I'd love to know if in India you've been able to partner or collab with interesting agri-tech firms or startups on ground, because they play a very important role in this social influencing.
They do, and again, we'll partner with basically anybody that shares our goals. We're always looking for partners, and the partners that I like most are the ones I'm not thinking of yet. It's one of the reasons I come to India and other countries. Like, okay, who are we not talking with? But again, when we were in Ahmedabad or outside of Ahmedabad, we made 3 different stops to 3 different farms and farming locations, and in one of them we saw some very interesting startups in a couple of areas. One is around biochar. Biochar is a carbon-rich byproduct of things like rice. Instead of burning the stubble, actually, burning it in the field, you burn it in a very controlled way, and then it becomes a very carbon-rich supplement that you can then put on a field. Helps enhance the fertility of the soil. And we've seen in some early pilots, we've seen a 19% increase in yields, which directly gets to farmer incomes and farmer livelihoods. Also a 33% reduction in fertilizer usage, which helps the farmer on the cost side, but also helps on the overall environmental footprint. And there was a company that was really doing this work on biochar with the kilns, and so we're working with them. And that's very powerful and maybe let's call it low tech. Okay. But we also talked with a company based here in India called Cropin, which is very high tech, satellites and AI and predictive weather to be able to provide a farmer on a phone based on the latest information across all of those, what's going to happen on my farm in the near future, right? So is there a cyclone coming and I'm about to plant, and you know what, I should actually hold off planting, because if I plant today or tomorrow and the cyclone comes the next day, I'm going to lose everything. If I wait a week, then I'll be in good shape, right? And that's a real example.
What a time when the AI summit is happening, right?
Yeah, exactly. When I came into Delhi, though, I think everybody on the plane except for me was coming for the AI summit.
Well, everything is interrelated now.
Exactly right. Exactly. So this is satellite technology, hyper-local weather forecasting, AI. Phones, being able to go to a farmer and provide them advice on what to plant, how to plant. Do they need more fertilizer? We can, a number of places we link it into drones so that they can, if you have a bigger field, you can fly the drone into the field and say, do I have an issue with a late blight, disease that hits potatoes? Do I have an issue? Where is it? I can catch it early, right? There's all sorts of things that can be done on the high-tech side. And we saw both Wednesday, so not very long ago, 2 days ago.
Got it. Jim, you did talk about recycling the products and the fact that you've been aggressively pushing it at the global and India level. Now, a paradigm shift to it is that when you look at sustainability strongly, the other aspect of it is also SDG 6, which is water. And when we recycle products at a major extensive level, then we also need to have enough water in the world to be able to do that. When you are drafting your policies or strategies, do you have to consider this, and to what level of conversations do you have to do in order to ensure that the SDG 6 is also secure like the others? Yeah.
The challenge, but the thing that is so important is it's just what you said about AI. Everything's interrelated, right? So as we look at anything, farmers can't grow crops if they don't have water. Recycling, as you say, requires some water. The production of our products, whether it's food or beverage, requires water, right? So we're always looking at water, and it's really in 2 areas. One is, how do we use as little water as possible? How are we as efficient as possible? And so we have one manufacturing plant here that is in India that's truly world-class, 0.7 liters of water per kg of food product produced, which is truly world-class. Our beverage partner here is extremely, extremely efficient around water. So we always are looking at how do we use less and how do we take best practices from India and bring them to elsewhere in the world. But also then how do we replenish water in the communities where we operate. So earlier this week also, on Monday, our Pune plant, which is a foods plant, I visited a water reclamation project, a replenishment project, where we're working with a local Indian organization and the community, a number of villages around it, to engage them. How do we desilt a water body? And then farmers love that because that's tremendously fertile soil. But then how do we use that so that that pond, or what used to be a pond, can be a pond again? Maybe we need to reline the well. There's a number of things. But to make sure that that can capture the water, replenish. PepsiCo has replenished 1.5 billion liters of water last year back into the watersheds, which is about twice the amount we've actually used. So, we believe very much in being a good corporate citizen when it comes to water, and that we can have a positive impact on that. We have a vision by 2030 to be net water positive. And in India, we're replenishing right now twice the amount that we use.
Jim, let's hope that 2030 aim comes to conclusion, because that's been quite under discussions with the whole SDG goals also.
Yes,
Okay, as we come to the end of this interview, just one quick last question. Jim, from a leadership point of view, what keeps you optimistic about sustainability?
I think that from a PepsiCo standpoint, what keeps me optimistic is we've worked very hard in India and elsewhere to really help leadership understand that PepsiCo Positive, our sustainability transformation, it's about business. It's linked to the long-term and short-term health of our business. We can't have a successful business if we can't grow sustainably if we don't act in a sustainable way, if we don't have these partnerships, if we don't help farmers be successful through regenerative agriculture, if we're not good stewards of water and replenish more than we use by 2030, if we aren't responsible around packaging. All these things are central to business. So what makes me optimistic is this is not something that at PepsiCo just sort of hangs out here. But again, it's squarely in the center of our decision making, of how we operate our company, and over time, more and more of our DNA, what makes PepsiCo PepsiCo.
Great, truly local for local. Thank you very much, Jim, for joining us on this conversation.
So much.
And wishing you luck for the plans ahead.
Thank you.
If you like the video, do like, comment, share and subscribe.